3 tips on what I do in order to shoot stills of inanimate objects. Let's go ahead and get some close-ups. I'll show you what I'm doing. Yo, hey guys, what's up? I'm Roy. Just wanted to say thanks for joining me today. Before I get started, I want to send thanks to David. Your shout out, man. Appreciate you joining from the Hef Nerd. David, he was like, hey, shout out, Hef Nerd. Also shout out to Alex. Bro, we need to hang, bro. For you to get a shout out, it's pretty simple. Drop a comment, yell something, ask a question, whatever. I'll give you a shout out. But let's get started, huh? Come on, let's go. We got things to do. I always get these a lot of questions. They go, Roy, how do you shoot this? How do you edit this? How do you produce this? How do you, I always get a lot of questions. Today, I wanted to kind of address some camera stuff. Generally, I'm always working with actors. Okay, Mark, can I have you to your place? Or I'm working with people who act a fool. What the hell are you doing?
I don't know, something entertaining, bro.
Either way, it's usually some human beings involved in the process. But today I wanted to give you 3 tips on what I do in order to shoot stills of inanimate objects like flowers, plants, trees, you name it. Let's get started. First tip you want to do is make sure you select the right lens. I'm a filmmaker, so I don't have a ton of gear, but I do have a few lenses that I did pick up over the last 6 or 7 years. I have a nice 24-70 that I recently picked up. I have a 50mm, which everyone knows, the nifty 50. I also have the kit lens, but for this shoot, I'm actually gonna use the Tamron 55-200. Here's the camera with the lens and the shade. I put the shade on it as well, so you can kind of see it here. After picking out the lens, I also have to remember that my camera, the Canon 60D, has a crop sensor. That means that it's not the full 35mm frame that you got in the old cameras when you're shooting film. A crop sensor lens is different from a full frame, much more expensive camera body. But you can still make magic happen with this thing. Don't count it out yet. The Canon 60D goes for about, I don't know, $300-400 bucks on eBay. Or you can get the newer model, which is that Canon 80D, which is really nice. And while I was in the backyard, I could see how this magnolia tree is really blooming. Let's go ahead and get some close-ups. I'll show you what I'm doing. The second tip is getting in the right setting. My settings are not too far off. I'm using a really high f-stop. I'm bouncing somewhere between f11, f10, somewhere in that zone for all of the still photos. You can see the settings are right there. Now when taking these, I'm kind of all over the place. I'm moving around, moving back further. With the longer lens, it gives me the ability to step away from the subject. In this case, the magnolia blooms. But that's what kind of gives me that shallow depth of field, because I'm using the full length of the lens. I'm way out there, even though I'm kind of at that 11 f-stop. And here I cheated a little bit. I went back to the 4.5, which is the widest that this particular lens can go. For video settings, it's a little bit different. One, it depends on what frames per second you're shooting. If you're shooting at 1920, 1080 at 24 frames per second, you're gonna wanna set your shutter speed at 1/48th of a second. In my camera's case, I can't do 48, so I set it to 150. When shooting at 60 frames per second, I wanna set my timer at 120. Of course, my camera, it does 125. For you novice, that's called the rule of 180. It's the 180 rule. Shooting video with this lens is a lot more trickier because, one, I don't have image stabilization on this particular lens. So I'm having to use some tricks in order to do that. Essentially, I take the camera and I'm doing this. As I'm shooting, I'm making sure the strap is pulled all the way. Even so much sometimes here. And even a lot of my shots, I'm moving my legs and keeping the camera steady. As you can see here, it just kind of sticks with you. It's not the best thing, but it's good. And a settings trick. For the settings, I'm shooting actually at 1280 by 720. And you think, hey, that's not full HD, that's not that 1080. Yeah, but I get 60 frames per second. So that means I can slow stuff down, as you can see here. And it smooths out any bumps that I have while I'm shooting. Needless to say, shooting with this really long lens is a challenge. So guys, just practice with it. Even you can see I'm kind of rusty too. Just keep practicing with it. And last but not least, number 3, you want to do any kind of digital editing in the computer. I use Adobe Lightroom in order to kind of finesse the pictures a little bit. That's always good. Just little tweaks here and there where you can see where it could polish it up, and then you can go ahead and export it. Well, with that said, I hope that answers your question. I gotta kind of assort this backyard here, make sure it looks clean. I appreciate you guys for any of your questions and comments. Hopefully that one helped you out. If you got a question, go ahead and drop it. I mean, man, I love working with actors and stuff, but this here helps you. It helps you know how I shoot. And it's not a perfect science. I'm still learning too. I'm not a boss like some people, but just learning. And hopefully this information can help you out whenever you got your camera and you're kind of a novice and you're trying to figure out how to do things on a tight budget with a less expensive lens. Anyway, that wraps it up. I appreciate it. Make sure you hit that subscribe button. Would love it if you dropped a comment on this video. Let me know if it helped you or not, or if you got any other questions about shooting video, stills, or what have you. I'm Roy. Thank you guys so much, and I'll talk to you next time. Oh. Mom's just walking out. She's like, hey, there's things going on.